Back in June and July of 2018, the entire world watched as the Thai government figured out how it would be able to save 13 people from a terrible incident. Today, we're going to be discussing the impossible cave rescue mission that saved a junior soccer team in Thailand. Be sure to stick around until the end to find out exactly how they managed to pull off such an impossible task. And hey, if you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and slam that notification bell so that you don't miss any of our amazing uploads. How did the boys get trapped in the cave? It all started with a junior soccer team from the Chiang Rai province of Thailand. The team consisted of 12 players and a coach. Following practice on June the 23rd, 2018, the assistant coach and the 12 boys decided to take a bike ride to the local cave and go for a hike. The cave was known as Tam Loang Nang Non, and it was a place that the boys and parents knew all relatively well. The boys made it to the cave and began hiking through the cave system, which spanned about 6 miles in various directions underground. Disaster struck shortly after the team entered the cave, when heavy rain began to fall outside. The rainfall began to flood the cave quickly, and before they knew it, all of the children and their coach were trapped. After not returning home for dinner, one of the parents knew that the children had gone hiking in that area and began to make their way to the Tam Loang Nang Non cave entrance in hopes of finding their children. Finding the soccer team. As family and rescue workers began gathering outside the cave, they all looked on in horror as it continued to flood. As more and more people showed up to show support and to assist in the efforts to rescue the lost soccer team, they also began bringing in large pumps to draw some of the water out of the cave system. But even if they managed to pump out most of the water, the rescuers knew that finding the children would be no easy task. The cave system itself was basically a 6-mile-long labyrinth with various tunnels branching off to various sections of the cave. Some areas are said to have ceilings as tall as temples. Other passageways appear to be more narrow than a crawl space. There was no telling where any of the children were, especially through all the murky brown water that filled almost every passage. After 9 days, there was finally news. A diver had finally discovered the children all piled up in a section of the cave that had not been flooded. The boys and their coach all gathered together and were clearly cold, wet, and hungry. The diver who found them let them know that hundreds of rescuers were working around the clock to make sure they all made it out safe and sound. The boys were then examined by medical experts, and the world was surprised to find out that they were all in relatively good health considering their circumstances. All of them sent messages to their parents letting them know that they couldn't wait to be home. Planning an impossible mission. It had been almost 9 days since the boys had been trapped in the cave, and now that rescuers knew where they were, it was time to come up with a plan. And due to it being monsoon season in Thailand, time was of the essence as a storm could roll in at any time, flooding the cave even further. By this point, more than 1,000 rescue workers from around the world had gathered to try to figure out the best way to get the kids to safety. This was going to be tough considering the conditions of the dive. The cave was full of narrow passages and tight squeezes, some of which were reported to be less than 2 feet wide. However, because they knew they needed to act quickly, a plan was devised. The idea was to send 2 divers in through the 2.5-mile-long cave system to the point where the children were. They would then take one child at a time and hook them up to a tether that was attached to the professional rescue divers. They would give the child a mask, oxygen, and due to the risk of injury or death if the boy had started to panic while diving, they even gave the children anti-anxiety medication. This was clearly a serious situation. They also planned to have over 90 divers stationed throughout the 2.5-mile route. Those divers would be there to assist with anything that the rescuers needed. They were equipped with extra oxygen tanks and masks in case there was a malfunction on the previous section of the journey. Now, this might sound like a very well thought out plan, and it really was considering the circumstances. But make no mistake, every person that went into the cave on that rescue mission knew how risky it was. The plan could have been perfect, and something still could have gone wrong. And while putting the final touches on the plan, the cave claimed its first victim. The death of a diver. On July the 5th at around 8:30 p.m. at night, a former Thai Navy SEAL made the dive into the cave to deliver multiple oxygen tanks. Saman Kunan was 37 years old. He was in good health and was a professional diver, which goes to show just how dangerous the situation was for anyone involved. As he was returning from delivering the oxygen tanks, something caused him to fall unconscious underwater. He was with a dive buddy when it happened, and they tried to perform CPR, but there was no success. Saman was brought to a nearby chamber along the path, which had been named Chamber 3, and it was there that they attempted to resuscitate the SEAL again. Sadly, there was no success, and Saman Kunan was pronounced dead at around 1 a.m. on July the 6th, 2018. The world had been watching, and the world mourned the loss of someone who could only be called a hero. As for the rescuers, they would have to wait to mourn, as time was of the essence and they still had to save the soccer team from the cave. Executing the rescue operation. However, after 17 days of being trapped in the cave, time was up. Storms were reported to be rolling in, and it was time for the rescue operation to start. It was July the 8th, 2018, and the governor of Chiang Rai province in Thailand announced to the world that the operation had begun at around 10:30 a.m. It was at that point the entire world waited to find out what would happen to the children. It was known that the rescue mission could potentially take 10 hours to rescue a single child, and everyone held their breath. Finally, around 7 hours and 40 minutes after the operation began, the first 2 children had been rescued and were carried out of the cave on stretchers, and only 2 hours after that, the third child emerged. By the end of the next day, July the 9th, the rescue divers had successfully saved all 13 of the people trapped inside of the Tam Loang Nang Non cave. Just outside of the cave, ambulances waited to take each boy as they emerged to the nearby hospital. There was even a helicopter on site to take them as well. The hospital was ready as well, and they made sure to prepare for the worst. They had stretchers lined up outside of the hospital, ready to bring each boy in to be treated as soon as they arrived. Once everything was assessed, it was determined that the coach of the soccer team was actually in the worst condition out of all of them. It turned out that he had been giving his food to the children, so he was malnourished, and the lack of oxygen only made his condition worse. Thankfully, after all was said and done, everyone was safe and made it out of the cave alive. The boys got to go home to their families after the ordeal was finally over. And about a year and a half after the rescue, another life was lost due to the incident. Beirut Pakbara, another Thai Navy SEAL who was part of the rescue team, passed away in December of 2019 due to a blood infection that he contracted during the rescue mission. I can't imagine what must have been going on in the heads of those poor kids. It's a miracle that they all managed to be rescued successfully. But what do you guys think? What would be the hardest about surviving for more than 10 days trapped in a cave? Be sure to let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date with all our uploads. See you next time.